people just down at beautiful Broad Beach. Good morning. Hi. So I'm here with beautiful Tanita. And I'm just coming back down to earth after it's a little bird over there. It's actually a big bird. It's running across. Anyway, total diffuse awareness. I was like, oh, a shiny, something shiny. It's fun, it's doing funny things. Anyway, so we were driving to the beach this morning and I was talking about vulnerability and how often women try to word things or say things in a certain way that will get a man to like, or we're trying to say the right things, trying to word things in the right way, and sometimes at the detriment of their own truth and vulnerability, even though it sounds kind of vulnerable, right? So I wanted to jump on and share an experience I had last week where this happened to me, and it was the next day I kind of got dropped in and I was like, holy shit, I actually didn't speak my full truth. And it was this kind of realization of, you know what? What's most important to me is to bear my truth and my vulnerability, even at the risk that I might be abandoned or rejected or avoided, which was what was going on, right? So basically what happened was I was seeing a guy up until about January this year, and he started to pull away because, for many reasons, but a lot of fear came up, a lot of wounds got triggered, and things were getting a bit too close. We became a bit too close and neither of us wanted a relationship with each other, and I know for him that it just felt like a bit too much. And when that happened, it was really hurtful, and I felt abandonment and I felt rejected and I felt all these things come up for me. And then I felt this energy of wanting to win him over or prove myself and show him how amazing I am and what he's missing out on and all this kind of stuff. And I observed it. I observed this, and then I went into my healing my wounds instead of going into I need to prove myself and give my power away. And instead I was like, okay, this isn't about him. This is about me. This is about me healing more abandonment, these feelings that had come up. Because he went into avoidance. He just didn't even want to like have a conversation because he wasn't ready to talk. He needed to process stuff. And I was thinking, you know, it might be like a couple of weeks, and it ended up being 2 months before we finally got to have a conversation about it. Because I'm the kind of person that's like, let's just sit down, let's just sort things out and let's clear everything, and come to kind of a completion. And so I had to really find that in myself. And so eventually we ran into each other, and I proposed the idea that because we were in the same community, that we actually sit down and have a conversation. So we finally had that conversation last Wednesday, I think it was, yeah. And I had all these notes, right? I was like prepared. I was like, right, this is 2 months of processing that I've done to completing this connection. And I just got to adjust this, yeah, okay. And I was like, I've got a lot to share, right? I've got a lot to share about what came up for me, and even sharing the gratitudes and the gifts and the appreciations of the connection, and how I see him now, and like just wanting to shift things into a new way of being with each other and into a beautiful friendship, right? However, there's kind of this undertone there as well of wanting to be reconnected and wanting him to feel valued by him, to see, I guess, and almost wanting him to want me, even though, and this is common, I see a lot of this happen, is like this energy of, I may not necessarily want him, but I want him to want me. I want to be wanted, right? Yeah. And it's shadowy, right? Because it's like, oh, well, maybe I don't necessarily want to be with you, but like, I want you to want me, or I don't want you to be with anyone else, like this kind of, and this, I'm not going to go into why that is, but that's a whole other another live stream. So I ended up, when I got there to talk to him, now I'm thinking that we're going to have like a good amount of time to talk, like this is good, like, and to be in my feminine and to drop into my feeling, it's like I need to feel free to, like, a freedom of expression, which means I don't want to be put on a time limit. So when I got there, the first thing he says is, just letting you know I've only got an hour. And my first thought was like, how am I going to get through all of this in an hour? As soon as you put a woman on a time limit, she cannot be in her feminine. It goes into her masculine. Because now it's like, oh, I've got to fit everything in, I've got to make the most important points. And it's like my logical brain is trying to work out everything I need to say. I've got to pull my notes out and make sure I get through this stuff. And that took me out of feeling. Like, it took me out of feeling what was really there for me, and what like being able to drop into my heart and into the sadness that might still be sitting there for me around like mourning the loss of the connection, and being able to share some of my like pain and sadness and things like that, and being seen in that by him. And I couldn't go there, like I just didn't feel safe to go there because I was on this time limit. And I was like, okay, what I want to do, because we both were at the Taste of Love Festival this weekend, is like, I just want things to be in a really good place with us, so that when we're in the space together, like everything's great, you know, like we're totally cool to be in each other's space, and we're friendly and all this kind of stuff. So I kind of went in with that, and so it was really like, my energy was really kind of playful, and it was really like light and friendly, and I shared some of my vulnerabilities, I shared some of the things that came up for me, I shared some of my responsibilities, and I shared some of my gratitudes, right? And at the end of the hour that I had, if you want a woman to be in her feeling, do not put a time limit on her. If you want her to be in her vulnerability, do not put a time limit, right? And the next morning, I just was writing out my gratitudes, and I was like, yeah, I'm really grateful for the conversation we had, because we were good at the end of the conversation. Like, we hugged and everything felt really great. There was like connection, and just felt really nice. So I felt really good going into the weekend. And in the morning I was like, EJ, you completely actually dishonored yourself. You didn't say everything you wanted to say. You didn't share you didn't actually share how hurt you'd been by the non-communication that you'd had for the 2 months, or the avoidance, and like you didn't share like that, what that really brought up, and it didn't drop into my heart. And I looked at that and I was like, why is that? And I was like, the fear that was sitting there for me is, if I went into this space, if I went into my emotions, if I went into my feeling, and if I went into calling him on some of his shit, if I went into calling him some of the stuff that actually hurt me, that he would go into avoidance again and not talk to me. And so there was this fear sitting there of, I don't want to do anything that will make him go into avoidance again. So I'm just kind of had this like a bit of a fluffiness to it, a bit of a like, I'm just going to address some of the issues and some of the things, but I'm not going to go into really how much that actually hurt, like, and what it brought up for me. I spoke it, but I wasn't in the feeling of it. Like, I spoke some of it, and I almost, like, I got his reality, but at the same time I didn't really stand up and like, you know, this is not okay, and this is how it, you know, needs to be treated, and this kind of, I didn't really stand up in that. And so I realized that in that moment, it was like I hadn't been willing to be vulnerable enough to be rejected, or willing to be vulnerable enough to be avoided or to be abandoned. And in that moment, I dishonored myself, and by not speaking my full truth and my full feeling. And in that moment, I had something clicked for me. And it was this beautiful moment of, what's more important to me than being with a man, or wanting a man to want me, wanting him to be liked by a man, or wanting to please a man? What's so much more important to me is to be in my truth, to be in my vulnerability, even at the risk that that man is not going to like that, even if that he means he's going to run away. Because ultimately, if a man can't hold me in that, then he's not the man for me anyway. You know, if he's not, you know, at that emotional maturity to be there and hold that, because I wasn't going to be blaming him. It was definitely coming from a space of responsibility, but it was like, yeah, how you showed up, it did hurt, right? And I also understand, because what I understand a lot about men, how men are so afraid to actually hurt a woman, like how painful that can be for them and their self-worth if they end up hurting. And sometimes they don't want to face it, so that's why they avoid, because they don't want to know. And this is why some men will ghost, is because they don't want to actually know that they've hurt the woman, because they place so much on their self-worth on making a woman happy. And so it's just avoidance. I'm just going to pretend that I didn't hurt her, right? And I know that he deeply did not want to hurt me, but there has to be ownership in that space, right? So for me, it was like, you know what, I'm now at that point, and I had done so much healing around healing this abandonment that came from the avoidance. And the reflection here, the reflection there was because he was in avoidance, and I realized, holy shit, my avoidance is avoiding my vulnerability at the risk that I might get abandoned, right? So the reflection, the mirror of, where am I avoiding? Where am I not showing up? Where am I avoiding? What am I avoiding? And if I go into pleasing or trying to say the right words, I'm avoiding not being liked or whatever's there. So if someone's showing up in avoidance, it's really like to look at, well, where am I not being fully vulnerable in my truth? What am I avoiding here? So I just got to this point where, you know what, I'm willing now, I'm in that point now, I'm so willing to honor myself at the risk that person might not be in my life anymore, right? And that's what's more important to me. That's what's more important. And it was this beautiful piece where I just felt like I stepped up my level of self-worth in a whole new way, to be like, you know what, like this is my standards. This is like stepping up and being a high value woman, and yeah, so it was a really beautiful moment, and it was just like I felt this shift inside me. And this is how I showed up on the weekend at the Taste of Love, and so many people like just came to me with like a reverence and honor, and like, wow, you're like, I love your vulnerability, and like you're so radiant. And I felt like this high value woman in this space, which is big for me, because I've had to deal with a lot of self-worth, like self-hate, self-worth issues. Yeah. So and then stuff still came up on the weekend around other men, and like looking at that too. So there's still stuff there for me. Yeah, absolutely, of course, Beck. We're all, every person is high value. Every person is high value, but sometimes we don't show up that way. We don't show up, and we devalue ourselves. So it's about setting my standards and my boundaries, and doing this in a loving, compassionate, non-blame way, but still setting those. And so what ended up happening is, because I saw him at the festival, and I actually said, hey, have you got 5 minutes at some point for us to have a chat? I just feel like there's some vulnerability that I need to share with you. And so what ended up happening is, and he said, yeah. And so I owned it. And I said, hey, I realized that the other night, like, having a time limit was really hard for me, and I couldn't go into my full feeling with you. And I realized that I wasn't really vulnerable. And it's really important that I'm in my vulnerability and in my truth. And I just feel like I couldn't go there with you, and I didn't allow myself to go there. Is it possible for us to create a time where there's not so much of a time limit, where I can drop into my feeling and in my heart? And then I said, because the reason why I didn't drop into my vulnerability is because I'm afraid that if I go there with you, that you're going to avoid me again, and that feels really scary. And yeah, and I own that. And he was like, yeah, I get it, I understand. It's like, yeah, let's make a time like during the day, like rather than at night, so he has more time available to talk about it. And then the other thing is that I became unattached to it. Like, there's part of me now that is like, okay, like I'm actually like quite detached from how that experience is going to go. I know going into that experience, I'm actually going in with the intention of, I'm not trying to get him to like me, I'm not trying to get him to want me, I'm not trying to prove myself. I'm coming in with like, I'm here to own my feelings and my vulnerability and my shit and what I need to be responsible for, without coming from a place of, I'm doing this to be liked. I'm you know, so it's, sometimes I think there's this shadow of when we drop into kind of a vulnerability or self-responsibility, and there's this shadow piece underneath that is like, well, if I show up in vulnerability and self-responsibility, that person's going to like me more. So that, I feel like that's another live stream, like, because I'm still kind of diving into that myself, and I haven't quite got, that piece hasn't quite dropped in yet, but it's sitting there. It's like a shadow of vulnerability that, because people love vulnerability, like, I think there's this shadow that plays out around vulnerability, but there's a vulnerability underneath the vulnerability, and there's some deep stuff there to look at, and the vulnerability about being vulnerable. That makes sense. But yeah, because sometimes I think we can use our vulnerability to try and be liked, and it's like, okay, what's underneath that? What's really underneath that? And so, and if we know, especially because I know a lot about men, right? And so I know what men like a lot. Like, I've studied men and I understand, and there could be manipulation in it, right? If I went into the shadow of it, of like, well, I know a man's going to like it if I say this, or say these things, or those words, or la la la, and then he might like me more, right? And then again, that's an avoidance of vulnerability. And then, you know, there's lots of things online now, and I love some of this stuff, right? But some of it you have to look at. There's online, like, dating coaches that teach a lot of great stuff, but in the end of the day, you've got to ask, where is this coming from? Am I saying this stuff to make this guy like me, or am I saying this stuff because it's actually what I feel and what's true for me? Am I trying to make him not abandon me or not reject me? And am I, like, it's like, where is your communication not being quite authentic, you know? And where are you using vulnerability to be liked? That's an edgy one.
Can I
yes,
add
please. I know Tanita's been beautiful holding up the selfie stick for me. So please. Yes.
I feel like this shows up for me in a space where, like, especially at the beginning of a connection, when there might be some vulnerable conversations going on, and I find myself going to my girlfriends to like, oh, what would you say, like, kind of mastermind the perfect text message, the perfect vulnerable text message that isn't really 100% from my truth, because, like, two or five of my girlfriends have helped me comprise it. But and it's coming from a space of, like, wanting to be liked, but seeming vulnerable at the same time, and it's so shadowy. And so I totally get what you're saying, yeah. And I just want to own that too, like, especially at the beginning of a connection. Whereas if we actually showed up in our truth and were vulnerable, then the men who are meant to be attracted to us would show up as well. So it's really, yeah. So I did this last year in a connection, and I found all this anxious energy around trying to get it right, trying to impress him. And then recently when we reconnected, we still devised a text message, but it was completely in my truth and about my standards, and I'd let go of the attachment of what he might think of it, and it was just so powerful. And it was just, it goes from giving your power away in a neediness in the way that you avoid vulnerability, to being fully in your power and accepting yourself regardless of what anyone else thinks.
Yes, and thank you for the point around, like, the neediness. I found that with this man, there was, like, if I show up in my full emotions and wanting him to hold me in that, that'll be too much, and he'll think I'm being needy, and then he'll go into avoidance or run away, like the too much thing. And then so I dumb it down a bit, and I'm like, yeah, I'm holding myself and my emotions, I'm managing it, la la la, which I do, but at the same time I'm still longing to be heard in that and seen in that. You know, I'm not, like, necessarily, like, I think there's a kind of a boundaries piece in there of looking at where am I projecting at, where am I holding myself. And yeah, it's like, it's again, it's like, it's so funny when I'm saying this because I'm like, these avoidance strategies, like all these avoidance of being seen a certain way. I don't want to be seen as needy, I don't want to be seen as too emotional, so I'm going to word things in a certain way. I'm going to show up and not quite show all of me, because that might scare that person away. And ultimately, you know, that's dishonoring to who we are. I think there's a difference between projection. I think that's, where I'm going with that is, like, it's noticing where it's like holding yourself and your emotions, and you're meeting your own needs and not projecting them on the other person, but you know, being able to speak, you know, this is what I'm needing, this is what I'm feeling. Yeah, and I think there's a piece there around asking permission of the person to be there for you in that as well. You know, rather than just going, here, I'm just going to penetrate you with all my shit. Actually, on the weekend, there was Janine, great presenter there, and she talked about how, you know, men have a lot of this penetrative energy, like penetrating, and, you know, it can be, for a lot of women in particular, it's like, oh, don't penetrate me with your, like, energy and your sexual energy. But what she talked about is how often women, or the feminine, so both in men and women, is we're penetrating our emotions out, right? We're like, and it's the shadowy undercurrent of like maybe judging men for their penetrative energy on us, when here we are penetrating them with all our emotional shit. And it's not seen like in the same way. It's like, no, you should just hold us in that. You should know how to handle it. Like, but we all process things differently, and yeah, there's a lot here. There's a lot. There's a lot. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's I think you really worded that quite well.
Yeah. See, we're being seen in our vulnerability. I was like, should I wear sunnies? And then I went to put my sunnies on. I was like, because I've got no makeup on, and I'm like, haven't brushed my hair, or haven't even washed my face. And I'm like, oh. And then I was like, well, we're talking about vulnerability, so I'm not going to avoid any of that. And so the other thing I want to add here is I am running a workshop on the art of loving men, where we are going to explore understanding men and exploring our own vulnerabilities around men, the ways we show up and are not completely vulnerable, the ways we understanding how we can honor ourselves, but also then honor the other person and honor men. And we're also exploring tantric practices, conscious relating practices, conscious communication, bit of cock worship. I'll be doing a demonstration of that, and that you won't be practicing it, but I'll be demonstrating it. So on the day one, we're going to be learning about and understanding men, and I'm co-facilitating this with a beautiful man, Kleinerman. So it's going to be beautiful to have a man in the space teaching from a man's point of view, which I haven't done before. So I'm really excited to actually have a man in the space who's going to be able to give a lot of juicy information from his experiences. He's done a lot of work on himself and a lot of, you know, tantra, conscious relating, and he's an amazing teacher. So I'm really excited to be doing that, and that also feels vulnerable for me, because I teach about men, but then you've got a man in the space who is like, well, I'm a man, and he knows much more about being a man than I do, right? So that'll be really beautiful too, I think, for me to drop into that vulnerability. And then on the day two, we're bringing the men in. So we're bringing in a group of beautiful men, and if you're a couple, you can have your partner come in as your man, and you can be partnered together, or you can be partnered in the group. And we're going to be exploring some of these practices in real time, real life experiences, real, like, experiential. So it's not just like I'm going to teach you a bunch of stuff, or Aaron and I are going to teach you a bunch of stuff. It's like you're going to actually get to practice it with real life men. So I'm really excited for that. So that's on the 19th and 20th of May here on the Gold Coast. And so this is probably the last workshop I'm doing in Australia for a while, particularly on Tantra, last weekend workshop, because I'm moving overseas soon, which I'm really excited about. So if you want to come and do some work with me in real life and workshop space, this is a really, really good opportunity, and it's actually at a really reasonable price, and there's a payment plan. And so if you look up the Art of Loving Men on Facebook event, but I also post it here so you can have a look. But this is all the juicy stuff we're going to explore, what we've talked about, and we're going to really allow you to bring up some of the ways that you protect and keep yourself safe from connecting with men. And you know, I've realized all this stuff over the weekend on more ways. The more I go out into spaces with men and workshop spaces with men, the more I see, like, oh, there's more shit, more stuff to look at.
Annette wants to know if you're going to do workshops in the US in the
Yeah,
future.
I would love to. I would love to. So we'll see. Definitely, I would love to go to the US. So if anyone wants me to come to the US, let me know. I would love to come.
How many people would it take in a workshop to get you there?
I think 20?
20
Let's say 20.
people.
That's what I'm thinking in my head.
If 20 of you reach out, EJ will come to the US.
If someone wants to organise it and get me over there, I will fly over to come and do a workshop there. And if you want to organise it, I'm happy to show up and work my magic. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Like, I'm totally open to being messaged. Yeah, if you want to do any work with me one-on-one, yeah, I'd love to support you. Just reach out and I can have a chat to you about how I work and everything that I do, because I do lots of different things. But really passionate about conscious relating and sexual healing, and yeah. Anyway, so LA could be on the cards. LA, definitely. I've been asked to come to LA by a number of people, so yeah. That's it.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
All right,
Awesome.
have an amazing, beautiful day. Much love.